Now, what about Dr. John? How was that experience? Was that extremely exciting and exhilarating and unbelievable for you? Get out of here.
I didn't know that.
Whoa,
Really?
I didn't know that.
Jeff, one of the projects you were able to do with Clyde and I was at Town Hall in Flushing, a very special event that captured the community's eye and ear and won public television's Best Holiday Programming Award back in 2010, and that was Noel, A Night of Everlasting Love. And it was quite the challenge for somebody to take charge of the engineering of that program with a 21-piece symphony orchestra and a live audience.
We got our man on today, a man I have a deep respect for, who has an encyclopedic knowledge of engineering and sonics and recording, Jeff Jones.
And his lot of other stuff, Clyde.
Well, his nickname is the Jedi Master.
He's very, very special. Just amazing the work that this guy has done. But also, there's something very, very much more. There's a spiritual context that I hope we're able to get into after we talk about his magnificent gifts as an engineer.
Don't forget, he actually recorded Mac Rebennack, otherwise known as Dr. John, Alicia Keys.
Yeah.
He had worked for a long time with Bill Cosby, etc.
And Marsalis brothers, right?
Well, he worked directly for Wynton Marsalis at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and he'll tell you about that story and how it came into existence.
And Clyde, he was also part of the award-winning public television holiday program that Flushing Town Hall and us produced, Noel, A Night of Everlasting Love. He was the man that put it all together from a technical standpoint.
How did you acquire the name Jedi Master, and why?
We couldn't even begin to ask you the number of people or name those people that you've worked with, but how about if we asked you your favorites?
I mean, for me, it was a kicker to record Wynton and Eric Clapton live at Lincoln Center.
Oh. Jeff, let's talk a little bit about the challenges of recording different kinds of performances well, for instance, compare a live performance with singers. Now, you notice, guys, I'm rubbing in my singing aspect of this because I had to listen to you guys and your instrumentalist stuff.
Okay.
But as a singer, we're very interested in this too. And I'm sure the people you've recorded that are singers can be very, very fussy about things and can be very, they really want to make sure everything is perfect, every single track in some way. But talk about the challenges of recording a singer, recording live as opposed to the studio, maybe. These are all things that you had to learn how to adjust to also, right?
Absolutely. Every singer is different. Some singers get it perfect on the first take. I mean, as an engineer coming up, you learn that you have to get the first take no matter what. Because every singer has been placed in the studio and they say, can you just sing that intro again the way you sang it before when you didn't know that you were being recorded, when you were totally naive? It's not possible.
That's right.
Before you knew the song, you sang it perfectly and you just can't go back there. So, one of the most important things is to get the very first take, because in my opinion, even though the singer might not like it, they went home the night before and slept on it and prayed on it and thought about it and were excited about coming in the studio. And the very first stuff out of their mouth is kind of karmically the most raw, but also has the most personality. And, you know, they might say, oh, I could do that better. So some singers, I've had some singers, one guy, we did all the tracks for his record, and then I came back to do, okay, now we're going to do your final vocal tracks. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he could not do it again. To him, he related to the songs as telling a story. And he was in the middle of the story as he did the tracking. And if he came back and tried to overdub it, he sounded like Alfalfa trying to sing The Barber of Seville. It was just horrible. Other singers, the more they sing it, the better they get. But ultimately, in the studio, you have the ability, both in the studio and live, you have the ability to take the best of different performances. And I say that live because a lot of the time, if it's a performance, I'll try and capture some of the rehearsal before the performance, because people always do stuff different, and you might get some stuff. And there's something that's kind of karmically funny about the way that the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain work. When a singer sings a song, they'll get the first line, the third line, and the fifth line perfect, and they'll know it internally, and they'll go back and concentrate on the second line and the fourth line, and there's a yin and yang that happens. Like the parts that they don't get on one take, the very next take, if you don't even talk to them, just say, do it again, the performance is actually reversed in a very symmetrical manner.
Wow.
And it's a really interesting phenomena. And it happens with professionals and non-professionals.
And then you can take the two tracks and mix them.
You take the two tracks and
get the best from each one.
Combine them.
Yeah.
And then they're, just the same as with musicians and practicing and writing and playing out live and getting the audience response and feeding off of that. There's a cycle that you go through. It's a learning cycle. It adds to the cycle for a singer to hear themselves back in a perfected light, where the best of their performances have been combined, because we grew up, let's say, listening to a series of performers that we emulated, and those performers had a flow, and they had people that they played with all the time, and they had people editing them, and they came out in a kind of a perfected, elevated light, both from their studying and how they were perfecting their art and how they were being edited, like cutting a diamond, let's say, that a producer would do. And
are you suggesting that the engineer sometimes exaggerates or inflates an artist's actual real ability to perform it live?
Well, what I'm saying is that if we're emulating these various other professional players, let's say each person in their own instrument, and then we as a sax player or as a singer or as a keyboard player do a couple of takes in the studio and have someone take the best of our performance and combine them,
Mhm.
and then we emulate that,
Mm.
it
Okay.
actually elevates our ability as a performer. We're copying ourselves
Right.
Mhm. That's
in an
interesting.
elevated performance.
Right.
And I've had the experience of jamming with somebody for a couple of guys for 20 minutes and then taking the best of that jam, the parts that are the most tight, and assembling a piece of music out of that, and then sitting down and learning that and playing that.
Mm.
And everybody came to the table with what they were currently shedding on, what they were currently practicing and working with artistically. And it was just the right combinations that
Sure.
all of a sudden made it a viable piece of music that was
Right.
improvised.
Now, how was
Uh,
it working with
yeah.
Alicia Keys? That
Oh,
experience,
she's.
her artistry.
I did a kind of a small job with her with a friend of mine, Chuck Fishbein, who was a videographer, and it was for the Sony Museum. And it had to do with a kind of a touch screen, which I never went to the actual installation, but she did several songs against a green screen, and it was, I think, primarily designed for kids, where they would be able to come in and do their own mix a little bit and add some reverb and things like that on a kind of virtual palette.
Mhm.
And you know, I personally, I think that she's just an incredibly talented human being. You know, she knows where to place her voice and how
Mhm.
how to give it that energy, and you know, she's done very well for herself. And it's I always study how people produce records. I mean, she'll go into Avatar or some other big studio, and they'll just bring in drummers for a week and make their own loops, make their own drum patterns and stuff that they'll, you know, use instead of having to pull them off records like rappers do,
Right.
and then having to pay royalties. They'll just make their own and groove with that, and then they'll make stuff out of that, which I found to be, you know, extremely exciting concept.
I keep on falling in at love with you. Sometimes I love you, sometimes you make me blue. Sometimes I feel good, at times I feel yours. Loving you, darling, makes me so confused.
Now, what about Dr. John? How was that experience? Was that extremely exciting and exhilarating and unbelievable for you?
Totally. I was a fan of Dr. John's since I was a little kid. When I actually met him, I mean, I met him in his bedroom.
You serious?
Yeah. I mean, well, see, I got a call from Hugh McCracken, and he said Dr. John needs some help with his studio, putting, you know, helping him in his studio in the Hamptons. And I drove out there thinking, okay, he's probably got a wing of the house where he's got a big mixing board and he's got, you know, all this equipment because he's a star. And I went, and he had like one microphone, a little sequencer, and a little ADAT machine, a little Mackie board with like 6 faders. And it was in his bedroom, and that was his composing station where he wrote. And you know, he was not technically minded, but there was a strange occurrence that was sort of kind of a karmic thing, where several months before I went out to his house, I downloaded a picture that I had found on the internet. And when I went to his house, the same picture that I had I'd only downloaded one picture in my life. And that same picture was on the wall of his bedroom.
Hmm.
And I asked him why that picture was on the wall, and he told me that it was a picture of his mother. And so right then I started hearing, you know, like the Twilight Zone score. And And, the more we worked with each other, the more I knew that there was something karmic going on, that there was some kind of connection. And he was one of those guys that, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but he also played the Montreux Jazz Festival.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, just an enigmatic genius and shaman, in my opinion.
They used to call him Dr. John the Night Tripper.
Yes.
And I don't know if that had anything to do with LSD or anything. I don't know.
Well, he was, strung out as many of us are, or were, or whatever at certain points in his life. And, but he had it together, and he was, part of the old school. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it's like meeting royalty. It's like,
right.
Doing stuff for Willie Nelson or Eric Clapton.
Sure.
Any of those guys that have just been there that, you've listened to for so many years. It's just, it's an honor to be in the room with him.
Of course.
It's an honor to get a call from him.
Of course.
I have a voice message from Wynton Marsalis.
Wow.
Where that I saved, that's just so classic. And it's just like, I just save the voice message because it's an honor,
right.
to get a call from somebody.
Great stuff.
That
Dr. John had a huge colossal hit. I was in the right place, but it was the wrong time.
Yeah.
It was a commercial hit. I mean, for people that weren't familiar with him, that really put him on the map.
He was music director for Sonny and Cher.
Get out of here.
I didn't know that.
Whoa,
really?
I didn't know that.
And he also was one of the Wrecking Crew kind of rotating people.
Yeah. Sure.
And he played guitar in those things.
Right.
And he told me that he had set up a deal with an artist, and the artist came to him and said, "I can't do the deal. My manager doesn't want me to do the deal." And Dr. John said, "Come on, man. We got the money, we got the record company, we got the studio, we got everything set up, and you don't want to do the record just because of some paper? Come on, let's just do it." And the guy said, "No, I can't do it." And so Dr. John said to me, he said, "I thought I could sing pretty good myself." And that's what I did. And he said, "I've been doing it ever since." And that was the right time that was the Night Tripper record. And the record was just so different from anything else at the time that it was like, what is that? And I played that record. I wore that record out. But I was so young at the time. I was so young that I put up Christmas lights in my room to make it seem more like a club.
Okay.
That's a
how
great
young
story.
I was.
Jeff, one of the projects you were able to do with Clyde and I was at Town Hall in Flushing, a very special event that captured the community's eye and ear and won public television's Best Holiday Programming Award back in 2010. And that was Noel, A Night of Everlasting Love. And it was quite the challenge for somebody to take charge of the engineering of that program with a 21-piece symphony orchestra and a live audience. And of course, Clyde, I think there were 72 people on stage.
Yes, definitely.
Singers, right?
Yes.
Quite an amazing situation to have to come in and try to engineer. Jeff, what can you tell us about that whole project?
It was a lot of work.
That's right.
I mean, there was, I think I had 2 assistants, and I had a rig that I could use to record on my laptop, 18 channels. I had to make sure that certain elements of the orchestra I had direct, like keyboards, the electronic-oriented stuff, I think bass and some other stuff, and then the other aspects of the orchestra, I had to make sure that they were, covered acoustically. And then, if you put mics in front of a big group of singers, then to me, they always sound good, especially if they're in a nice space in a theater or whatever. But the real reality, the real work for me, I mean, it's like there's a lot of physical work to get the stuff set up, and to break the stuff down and to make sure that all the instruments are covered and all the contingencies are covered. But, when you're mixing something like that, that's where you really have to get very specific with the editing, with how it's all put together. I mean, any places where something is repeated, where one performance is better than the other, even within a piece of music, let's say, you do substitution. You always have to make sure that the lead people, such as yourself, Andrew, you were narrating, those mics have got to be crystal clear. There can't be any problems with those.
Yeah, certainly not.
Totally important. That's like the centerpiece of the entire thing. And then, as long as you have basic coverage and the musicians are playing the right stuff, and you just, kind of fade out a few bad notes here and there. If there's a few, I mean, there's always a few, but sometimes, it's amazing actually on records that we all know and love, how many little mistakes there are. And those mistakes actually, they're part of the flavor. It's part of the personality. That's important. So, for me, the fact that I was able to be on the stage behind everybody was good. It's more difficult for me if I'm up in a booth, like in the sound room, which is usually all the way at the other end of the theater.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question because a lot of people are always, when they're doing this kind of work, they're in a sound booth in the back of the auditorium. Well,
I mean, I work with headphones, and I feel like I recorded a symphony in Nebraska, and they said, "So you'll be up there," and they pointed to something. It was like 3 flights up. Yeah, to go up a bunch of stairs. You know how many times I run down to adjust mics?
Yeah. Sure. That's got to be crazy.
It would have been 10 pounds off of me.
Would have been crazy.
I sat up on the side of the stage. I'm happy.
Yeah,
I'm happy. I'm able to kind of get in there and put the mic a little closer to the bass end of the piano or whatever. I'm listening to each element.
Yeah, and the challenge of this was it was live. You had people, you had an audience also.
Yeah.
Plus you had television that was involved in this, and they were taking your feed. It was quite a challenging event. Yeah.
Well, that's part of the, I saw it online and I was like, you know, I'm an artist.
Mm.
So the entire time that I'm mixing something live, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this sounds terrible. Oh, it could be better. How can this is just not the best, I listened to the television thing. I was like, it's not bad. Oh, it's okay.
No, yeah.
I listened back to the record. Like, it takes me a year to be able to listen to a record that I really,
Yeah,
really
I'm
worked hard
sure.
on.
Yeah.
And I'm going, it ain't bad. But that's why I work on it so hard.
Yeah, the CD was
That's why I work on it so
spectacular.
hard, though.
After you were able to put your magic to the live recording, the CD was just absolutely spectacular, and people went crazy for it. They're playing it all these years. Think about it. That was
Still, right? Sure.
11 years ago now, right?
Right.
Well, all right, 10 and a half years ago.
Yeah.
And 2013, there was a second concert similar to that, but nothing that reached that pinnacle because these were sold out performances. There was no room at all in that place, let alone how you were operating on a stage that really couldn't handle 72 people. But it was quite
was
amazing.
Was Jeff involved in the second Noel production? I think so.
I think we did a CD, but we didn't publish the album.
He was there. I remember him being there.
Yeah, he made a recording for us. That was it.
Right.
It wasn't where we published an album and we were doing a live feed, but so he mixed the feed that went out to QPTV, but we didn't make an album out of that.
But here's something else you forgot, Jeff. You also did a recording for me for Flushing Town Hall called The Legends of Storyville for the Sidney Bechet Society.
I was just looking at that CD tonight, right before, because I pulled a bunch of CDs out to like take pictures of them, and I went, oh yeah.
And from what I understand, what you told me, somehow Wynton Marsalis heard that because he's from New Orleans, and that may have led to you working at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Is that true?
No, actually, I think, Wycliffe Gordon was on that, right?
Yes, he was.
Yes. So, Eric Reed heard the recording and made a note that it sounded really good to him. I'm not sure if I was already working with Wynton at that point. I think was interesting. I did a recording of Wynton at a Lower East Side nonprofit theater, and it was a benefit concert, and it was called Live from the House of Tribes. That was something that it took a few years for it to occur, but I think that got Wynton's ear. But in the meantime, I was feeling disappointed, like, because I wanted to go. I was like, I want to go to his house, and it was a video and a record and everything, and I wanted to go to Wynton's house and like hook up his TV and adjust his sound and say, here, check this out. And nothing was happening. I mean, it was just dead crickets. But then Eric Offner said to me, well, we have Wynton Marsalis's keyboard player that we're doing this thing with, and I said, "Oh yeah, I just did a recording of him," and I played him a little bit of the recording, and he said, "You got the gig." So I was using that. I was using
Whoa.
that as a calling card,
Good.
and that's one of the ways I got hooked up with Eric Offner. Doing these archival recordings. But for me, archival recordings means you set up 2 microphones. But I always did more.